Hi everybody, it's Carla. It is a nice and cool day, but still warm enough to have the windows open here in Alabama, which means about 60 degrees. There's really no breeze today. The rain hasn't moved through today, so I'm just letting the house air out and doing some spring cleaning. With all these scares for the virus and that are going around, a lot of people are just kind of hunkering down, staying home if they don't have to get out and go into crowds. And so it's a good time to kind of sort, work on craft projects, reevaluate, do some spring cleaning, and that's what I'm doing today. And would you believe that up until last year I had never knit socks? I think I attempted to crochet socks before, but they were very uncomfortable, and I didn't have the right kind of tools. I was intimidated. I didn't know how people could knit in the round like that to make a sock. And since I have arthritis in my hands, it kind of scared me off. And then last year I just dove in. And some are hits, some are misses, some turned out very wonky looking, and some turned out really, really nice. I used a lot of different techniques. I would take a part of this pattern, make a heel like this one and a toe like that one, and then if I didn't want to adapt to either of those, I would make a tube sock. I would search for vintage patterns and pull what I could out of that. I gathered up thrifted fingering weight and sock weight yarn, and I bought a few at the store, and I found some on eBay that I like better than others. And I'll just kind of walk you through what I've made. This one, 100% wool sock. Do not do like I did, throw it in the wash and then put it in the dryer. I didn't have enough of either to make the whole foot the same, so I staggered it. And this is a definite miss. But if nothing else, I can put them over my hand and use them for dusting. What can I say? This one, it is Patton's Croy yarn. And the heel, not bad. The toes, not bad. I was learning how to Kitchener stitch, and I didn't do a very good job. I did not count my rows, and so one leg was longer than the other. The feet were good, but the legs weren't, and so I added on with some crochet. Another odd one. This one, mismatches of different types and weights of yarn, which makes it kind of wonky when you wash it, but I still like them, and when I get them on my leg and foot, they actually do fit good, so I do wear these ones often. They just look a little strange. And I made a ribbing right here at the top of what is the heel so that it holds on to my foot better, which is a nice little design idea, but it kind of is not showing up on this too well. These are some slipper socks made with worsted weight yarn on bigger needles, I think a size 4. And my needles I'm using, I've tried the Magic Loop on the long red corded needles, and they're the real sharp kinds, the Chow. They poke my fingers, and I don't like dealing back and forth with pulling that big long cord through. So on eBay I found some vintage 11-inch circular needles, and that's how I make most of my socks on those. And I don't like making them on flat needles and trying to sew them together. That's just too hard for my brain to comprehend. So these are made on size 4, I believe, circular needles and with worsted weight yarn. And they're very cozy and comfy for just kicking around in the house here, and I like those. Those are nice. And like I said, some of these I followed a pattern, and some over time I've just adapted my own way of making a pattern that works for me. Now this is a wool blend sock. I'm not sure. It might be Woolies, and by Lion Brand. But it's another slipper sock made on the bigger needles. And it's got a garter stitch heel and a Kitchener stitch toe, or a barn toe, I'm not sure. And then some ribbing at the top. And those are really nice and comfortable. These are crocheted. Haven't wore these much. Don't like these very much. They feel funny on the bottom of my feet. They're not like knitted socks, but it was an experiment, and it is doable. And it would be good, you know, just bed socks or something. If you're making for somebody like in a nursing home or something where they're pretty much in bed and just to keep their feet warm, it'd be fine for crocheted. But to actually walk on them, I find they're not very comfortable. So I don't really like crocheted socks. And if you like crocheted socks and they work for you, I'm glad. My feet don't adapt very well. This was a pair of slipper socks I made for a Valentine's Cal that Kathy Morgan offered for her viewers. And they turned out really nice. They were out of worsted weight yarn, acrylic yarn. And I liked how they turned out. So yeah, I like these. And I do like slipper socks if we're just wearing, you know, here. But in Alabama, it's not near as cold. I wish I'd known how to do this when I lived in Michigan and we had the really cold weather around and we had the fireplace with the wood burning in it and all this. Down here, we don't get too many days that are that drastically cold. This is another Patton's Croy yarn, and it's made on, I believe, the size 2 circular needles. And not perfect, because you can see the, you know, it's just not, I mean, I think the one foot is a little bit longer than the other, but hey, it's a learning curve. And like I said, up till a year ago, I hadn't ever made socks, so I think I've learned a lot. This is another worsted weight yarn. It's very soft though. It's not like Red Heart yarn, so I'm not sure what it is. Almost all my yarn is thrifted or found at yard sales, flea markets, or purchased on eBay. I rarely buy yarn in the store, and so I'm not even sure what yarn this is, but they're very cozy, very, very cozy. And just, yeah, I like those pair a lot, and I wear them a lot. This is a wool blend. I haven't wore these too much, but I didn't have enough of brown, and I didn't have enough of this rusty red color, so I decided to make the top and the cuff with the red, and the foot and the toe with the brown. So they're very nice too. And like I said, sometimes my heels turn out better than others. This one I didn't make the garter stitch heel. I actually turned and wrapped the heel like I was supposed to, and the toes the same way. And I think I've even made a pair or two of loom knit socks, but I'm not sure which ones those are. This is another pair of worsted weight yarn, and it's got purple toes, heels, and cuffs. These are super comfy, and I wear these a lot. Now, this one, it turned out nice with this toe. I don't know what I did over here, but somehow I sewed it together, and it looks very wonky. I don't care. It's inside of a shoe, and it's super comfortable, and I love this pair of socks. This pair was from a Red Heart Gumdrop worsted weight acrylic yarn. They are probably one of my nicer pairs. Now you're going to notice I've got long foot areas in mine because I wear a size 11 in a lady's shoe. I've just got a long foot, so I have to adapt it for me. And that's why I've took bits and pieces of different patterns. I don't have one exact pattern that I follow. I just adapt it to my foot and to the needles I'm using and to the yarn I'm using. I just make my own up as I go. Again, the garter stitch heel, and I think these are the barn closed toe, and 1x1, no, this is 2x2 ribbing at the top and regular stockinette for the foot and the leg. Now this one, I love to go through old pattern books and find unique stitches. So I found this one, and I was just experimenting, and when I got the knack of how to do the stitch, I said, well, I'll just make my next socks with this as the top. And it turned out really elastic-like, and it fits my leg very nicely. And so it's got the garter stitch toe, heel, stockinette stitch for the foot area, and then this pretty pattern stitch. I think it's a fake cable is what it's called or something, and it's just really, really nice. And again, acrylic yarn. I love acrylic yarn because when you wash it, you don't have to worry about blocking it, and it just fits again like a glove. This is made from a mandala, which I think got some mandala cakes at Walmart when they were clearancing them out. and I made socks out of them. And this area was just my own little design idea, just to cinch it in a little at the heel area, and also it holds it on my foot better. And I like that. And these are very super comfortable. Had a lot of fun making socks in different ways, and I think I'm good on socks for a while. So hats, socks, I'm kind of good. Now I'm trying to find other things to make. These, I'm not sure of the yarn, but they are some of the most comfortable socks I have. And I love the gradient colors that move down into the foot and to the toe area. And just super, super nice. And I think these were Kitchener stitched on the toes. And they had the, these were made on the smaller circular needles. And just the stitching is super nice, and I loved making these ones, and I love wearing them. They're some of my favorites. These are made with Patton's Croy. It's kind of that cottony feeling sock yarn. I love the striping of them, and yeah, they turned out nice. You can see though I am learning to count rows. I do have a row counter, and I have written them down on a piece of paper and counted rows that way. Doesn't always work. And I still ended up having to add some up here, come back in after it was all said and done, and throw a few more rows of knitting around the top to make it as long as the other one. Again, this is a Mandela cake yarn, and I just like the colors and I wanted to try it. It's got Kitchener stitch toe, which I do not do perfectly, but it works for me. It's got that design detail where I do a little ribbing, which shows up on the top, and it's also on the back, but it's by the heel, and it cinches in the heel better for me. And yeah, it turned out really nice, and that's an acrylic yarn, and I love that. Then I went into a phase and found an old vintage pattern of making a man's sock out of just a tube and of ribbing. And so it's got 1x1 ribbing up here for the cuff, then it goes to 2x2, and then it just had a cinched toe, but I wanted a more fitted toe, so I actually did a garter stitch toe, and I stitched it together at the end. And this is made of a long discontinued Patton's Croy called Paint Box, and people are hoarding it on Pinterest. You never see it for sale anywhere, but I got some yarn from an eBay purchase, and there were 2 skeins of this paint box in there, and it was amazing. And I made this out of it, and it's the old Patton's Croy from years ago when it was a nicer, cushier feel. It wasn't this real thin stuff that you get today, and it's just super nice. If you can ever find Patton's Croy sock yarn from the older style, it is amazing. I don't know why they changed it. So that's one pair. This is a Christmas acrylic yarn. No, I'm sorry. It's an actual sock yarn, so it's a wool acrylic blend. And I did the ribbing at the top, the ribbing throughout, and then closed it with a barn toe here. And those turned out really nice. I love how these, you wouldn't think they would fit good, but especially on a longer foot, they fit really, really nicely. This is a pure acrylic baby yarn, and it's got a sparkle in it, and it's got little stockinette stitch here, barn toes, and it's got the ribbing all the way up, and then the narrower ribbing for the top. Fits super well. And made another pair out of Christmas acrylic yarn, and you can see it right here. Just turned out really nice. Got the toes that I like, and super nice and squishy. And then this was actually, I think, the first pair of tube socks, that I made, and it was not ribbed. It actually had a pattern. So these are a little bit looser on my leg and on my foot area, but they still fit. It has a cinched toe, and it has the ribbing at the top. And it turned out really pretty, and this was actual sock yarn. But it's I think it's a more acrylic and less wool blend to it, and they wash up really well. They are really nice to wear, and I love these socks. And then these are shorty kind of socks. They're not as long, and I used a mixture of sock yarns and fingering weight yarns and just whatever I had, and I put them together. Different kinds of toes, Some have heels, some don't. So there's one pair. This was a Bernat socks, which makes a thicker acrylic. It might be all acrylic, or it might have a tiny bit of wool in it, but I love the feel of this, and I usually make them with a size 2 or 3 circular needle, and they're just so nice. They're not near as slippery to, off of my needles as regular thin sock yarn does, and they just work for me better. They got the little design element, and of course, again, they were one of my early pairs, and so the length was not quite right, and I had to adjust it and do my own little thing. It's also got some flaws. You can see where I've had to stitch it in. But hey, it's a learning curve. And that's half the fun of crafting, is you learn as you go. You get better and improve. This is wool, vintage wool down here, 100% wool. And up here I had some white wool skeins of yarn that I actually dyed myself with